All right, so thanks everybody for tuning into this episode of Greater Than 0%. Today we have two guests again, which is always nice to have. And today we have Vriti Saraf, co-founder and president, and Mike Peck, co-founder and vice president at Ed3 Dao. Vriti and Mike, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so per usual, we like to start with the mission of the organizations that we're interviewing. So what is the mission of Ed3 Dao?
Yeah, our mission is to help educators learn about emerging technologies so that they can prepare students for the workforce of tomorrow.
All right. So we're going to dive into that. But before we do, I have the privilege of interviewing the co-founders of this organization. So obviously there's a reason why you wanted to found this organization. So I'd love to maybe Vriti start with you and then go to Mike as to what is the driver of wanting to found this organization?
Sure. So I actually spent about 15 years in education. I was a teacher for a while, then I was a dean. I was building schools, local charter schools, public schools in Brooklyn, and then I built schools around the world. And during my travels, I found that educators around the world are doing really incredible things, but oftentimes we don't hear about them and they don't share them with each other. So they're reinventing the wheel over and over again. And technology has had such an incredible impact on all other industries. But the other thing I noticed with education as I was traveling was that technology was not very prevalent or used or leveraged in these classrooms. And so I actually started with a meetup, and that's where actually I met Mike, where I just wanted to talk to other educators about what they were doing about the emerging tech and the new frontier of Web3 that had emerged with blockchain and metaverse and AR, VR, XR, and all these new interesting things that had appeared, including AI. And from there, once I met Mike and some other educators, we realized, there's an opportunity here for us to actually get together as global educators and start working together on the new frontier of education, on reimagining learning. And we knew that we wanted it to be a nonprofit from the get-go because we found that all too often ed tech companies, some of them are great, but some of them are, preying on educators. And we really wanted to break that cycle. And so we try to do as many free education events as possible and try to engage our community members for free. So that's kind of how it started. But Mike, do you want to say more about how, what your thoughts are over there?
Yeah, sure. So it's really, I think, an exciting time for us to be in education. Currently, I'm still in a school. I'm a full-time educator. I'm a director of technology for a public school district. And it's really exciting work because I think the potential of technology to really enhance the opportunities we have for learners or for creating for learners is really substantial. And I started teaching in 2008, 2009, and kind of taught through the first wave of ed tech and saw, we had this opportunity with technology, but we kind of put it into the same box that education lived in before. So we still have rows of desks in the classrooms. We still have students who are, working on worksheets and a lot of teacher-led instruction, and kids have to sit in seats for 40 minutes and move to another class. So unfortunately, a lot of education hasn't really changed, even though we have all this new technology. And so while it is exciting, the work that I do, it's also, in my opinion, I think we can do more. And so in exploring kind of the breadth of the internet, I did meet Vriti, of course, originally in a session that she was running on blockchain technology in cooperation with ISTE. And we eventually kind of circled back via Twitter over interest around DAOs, which is really kind of the genesis of our organization. And at that point, we were sort of interested in exploring how we can build new organizations that can not just talk about reimagining education, but do it. And that's one of the key differences, I think, in hopefully, what our mission moves towards the most is taking what we're learning and applying it and experimenting and trying new things to enhance opportunities for learners. And so I get really lucky because I get to spend my evenings kind of thinking about all this awesome potential for technology and then bringing it back to my school district where we're exploring different kinds of things like AI and other technologies that leverage blockchain. So it's really great for me because I get the best of both worlds through this experience.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you both for the origin story of the creation. Now, before I want to go to what are some of the programmings that you focused on right when you guys started the organization, before we do, I want to break down the name. So you've mentioned Web3, Ed3 is the name. You mentioned DAO. What is the story of the name of your organization and why?
Yeah, so Ed3 is the way that Web3 is the evolution of the web. Ed3 is the evolution of education. We know that the new horizon for how learning and teaching will happen is still not quite hasn't quite been manifested yet, and we believe that once we reach that sort of pivotal point where we can align our education with how the world is evolving, that's when Ed3 will sort of happen. And DAO stands for decentralized autonomous organization, and so I'll break each one of those things down. So decentralized meaning distributed governance, and so one of the things that we want our organization to do is put the power into the hands of the members and really distribute the way that learning is happening across the world for them and for their learners. And so a lot of our efforts are focused both internally on creating governance models that are distributed, but also externally by sharing and promoting and empowering people with distributed governance strategies so that there can be more democratized learning. So that's the distributed part. The autonomous part is basically how do we create mechanisms in an organization that allow it to operate without a lot of bias and without a lot of intermediaries, and that's where blockchain really comes in. So can we put out voting and fund allocation and decision making so that a vote happens and there's no biased party stopping it or interfering, and it just sort of gets executed on chain. So that's the autonomous part. Like, how can we make it as automated as possible? And of course, organization is a group of people getting together, trying to do a similar mission.
Yeah. The D and the A, is that the opposite of what the historical education system is? Kind of probably an obvious question, but I'm wondering if you feel that model, this DA and O model, but more the decentralized autonomous, is the exact opposite of what the current state is. Because a lot of times the organizations I'm interviewing wouldn't be around if there wasn't a big need or a gap that's not being filled by whoever. So what's your perspective on the current education system and why it can't adapt quickly, or based on the current structure, why isn't it happening faster, this change?
Yeah, I'll start, and certainly Vriti fill in gaps if there are any. I'm sure there will be, but I think that's definitely an accurate depiction of kind of where education is at right now. We have very top down, very structured systems in place that were designed really for an era that doesn't exist anymore. The system as we know it today was largely found on principles that were based in the 1900s, the early industrial revolution. And what you get as a result is very standardized product at the end of a K-12 experience. And what we know of the world is that it's definitely not that linear. Learning doesn't just end in grade 12. Learning doesn't happen within the four walls of a school. And so we certainly need to be thinking about schools and how we can find ways to become more agile to meet the needs of the workforce and the world today. And so I think part of that is in building organizations. So not just talking the talk, but walking the walk, and building organizations that demonstrate those principles, that provide agency for the members. And I think, largely in education too, as a classroom educator, you have very little, capability to make decisions that affect, much beyond your classroom. In some cases, not even within your classroom. And so providing and giving power back to the edges, where boots are on the ground, where people are making decisions and where people are having the most impact, I think is a really, really important thing for us to do. And so by sort of eliminating those structures, those hierarchical structures, we create and model what we hope to see in the world of education tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, a really important part of the design for our organization.
Okay. So, yeah, getting into your initial programming that Ed3 Dao started when you guys first were incepted, what were some of the programming or curriculum that you worked with teachers, if that was the initial focus too, what you're doing now, focusing on educating the educators? What were some of the first activities that you did to start?
Yeah, the very first thing that I ever did, which actually triggered, the meetups that we started doing, was we held a global conference for educators in an avatar-based environment. This was in 2021, and it was the world's first avatar-based conference for educators, and it was a choose your own adventure conference. So basically, there were, when you entered the space, you were this tiny little avatar. You could walk around wherever you wanted. And we had multiple activities happening at the same time. We had learning labs and masterminds, and we had vendor booths and cafes. And folks would walk around and engage with each other. And the reason we did that was precisely what Mike just said, which is we really wanted to model for educators what we want to see with students. Too often, educators are experiencing professional development where they're getting talked at to do something more hands-on with their students. So how are we expecting educators to understand what the deep value and the pedagogy behind, let's say, something like project-based learning or inquiry-based learning is, if all we're doing is talking at educators? So this experience was basically one of the first of its kind, and we got about 500 educators from around the world. We had a few really incredible speakers that took a chance on us, and we engaged educators in conversations that they weren't having outside of the space.
Yeah.
And that really instigated the conversations around reimagining learning and really rethinking, teaching and how the education system should work. And that led to Web3 and the innovations that are happening, in the technology sense. And so I actually personally got very into blockchain just because I really appreciate the nature and the principles of decentralization and regenerative economies and things like that. So one of the first things that we did as a DAO was we started educating people about blockchain. And we started educating people about what it would mean to put your credentials on blockchain, what it would mean to put your IP on blockchain, how that might change the user experience for a student and for a teacher, and how ownership would really empower and provide agency to anybody who engages with it. Again, going back to all the main tenets that Mike just talked about.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And that first conference that you hosted, so one of the things that where my mind goes when you mention these concepts is it could be perceived as overwhelming to try to learn these new technologies for educators. Is that valid, or is that a kind of mistaken perception? Because I mean, it's intimidating. Like, some of these topics are intimidating. So how do you make it like approachable and learnable, and like blockchain, for example, for educators specifically, of course?
Yeah, I think that's really the secret sauce, right? Is translating really complex ideas into pieces that are digestible. And the way we've approached teaching educators about these technologies is through practical application. I think that's really the most important thing is not talk about all of how a network operates and how to run a blockchain, and like these deeply technical concepts are not really important to an educator.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine, because I think we'll find in time that it'll become easier and easier to use these technologies, as we're seeing with like the AR VR wave. We're starting to see Apple Vision Pro come to life. So AR and VR is having another start. Had a bit of a false start before, but I think through practical application, we can begin to see the real impact of these technologies. And so that's the way we approach it, is by showing educators how these technologies are actually being used in the wild. And so when Vriti's talking about credentials, there are exemplars in places where this is actually being used already. And so we can talk about what it means to have your transcripts on blockchain, what it means to have your digital identity to be able to access various resources or communities on chain. And so there's a lot of different use cases. Most people think of it as like a financial technology blockchain, but any data can go on there. And so by showing people how to use this in a hands-on fashion becomes much, much easier to understand. So we would definitely say that we're taking that approach with blockchain, with AR, VR, metaverse kind of topics, AI in particular, because it's an incredibly relevant topic right now for educators. So through that hands-on approach, we find it a lot easier to reach people.
And I'll add one more detail to that. So teachers understanding pedagogy and leaders understanding their role as leaders, let's say superintendents or principals, is really what matters to them, right? So they don't care whether they implement the pedagogy with or without technology, as long as they're doing it in a way that impacts students' outcomes. And so the courses, so we actually do deliver courses and we deliver free workshops. In either of those scenarios, we try to integrate pedagogy, research-based pedagogy, as much as we can. So for example, instead of just teaching about artificial intelligence or how to use ChatGPT, we'll teach about universal design for learning and how to enhance that using AI. Or just teaching about metaverse or AR, VR, XR, we'll teach about immersive learning and contextualized learning and virtual reality. Or instead of teaching just about decentralized finance, we'll teach about creating microeconomies in your classroom so that students understand larger concepts of money. So we try to sort of like weave the pedagogy into it. And then with the pedagogy comes the standards that are relevant to whatever state, country that we're working with. And so that really becomes the crux for implementation in a way that actually matters to educators and to students.
Awesome. Has it been a challenge at all to engage educators that are not just technology teachers or professors, like people that don't just focus on STEM, but outside of the STEM conversation? Has it been hard to rally those types of educators? And is it relevant to rally those types of educators as well for this?
You know, it's been harder to rally those educators with previous technologies, but with AI being so superfluous and easy to access, it's been a lot easier because AI can provide you a really easy win really quickly. And so educators, leaders are all sort of tapping into that expertise. But, you know, one of the arguments that we constantly make is you don't want to use AI to produce more garbage, right? So it's like if you're doing if you are not quite understanding pedagogy in the first place and you're using AI, that doesn't make your teaching practices better. And so it's really about understanding the sort of the practice of teaching or the practice of leading or the philosophy of it really well first. And then using technology to enhance that and maybe even provide you guidance as a cognitive partner, right? Can you use AI to basically give you feedback on the things that you're already trying to do and have you do them better, right? That's really one of the things that we're trying to push for. And so, you know, the audience, I think, shifts when the technology becomes relevant to that sort of sector. Yeah. And I think you're totally right. It has been a little bit harder to engage educators who are not in technology. Unless it is like really relevant to their profession. But like universal things like AI have been very, very attractive to basically anyone.
Awesome. Wow. So you guys started first by having that big conference with 500 people already, just as a first trial. When was that and how has that evolved to today?
I was in 2021, and that was our first avatar-based conference. And we're having our third one coming up in a month. On April 19th to the 21st. It's a 3-day event. So the first one was a 1-day event. And this is a 3-day event where the first 2 days are scheduled programming. So we've got ed talks, masterminds, learning labs, networking sessions, tools for exploration, all about AI and Web3 for education. And we've got incredible experts and incredible folks speaking, including, you know, heads of AI ed tech companies. We've got authors. We've got folks from Stanford and Fordham and great universities. We've got superintendents speaking. We've got educators on the ground speaking. And the first 2 days, they're programmed. And the third day, this is our favorite thing to do. And we did this last year and it was the most beautiful thing. The third day is an unconference. Because if you'll remember, you know, we are really all about distributed learning. And so we really want to practice what we preach. So on this third day, we give the reins completely to our participants and our audience members, and they actually take over the entire conference, create their own sessions, and facilitate peer-to-peer learning and participate in hackathons. So it's a super cool and fun evolution of where we started from, and we're very excited about it.
Wow, that is exciting. When we spoke previously before we hit record, one of the things that I usually like to ask organizations is measuring and how they're measuring impact, and just to see the first conference you had with 500 people, and hear the growth is to the third time around here is very exciting. You also shared that you have some metric goals for your organization. I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the goals that you have and how you guys are tracking to those goals.
Well, one of the main goals is we want to educate 1 million educators on emerging technologies. And the reason we chose that number very deliberately is because on average, an educator impacts about 3,000 students in his or her lifetime. And so if we can educate 1 million educators, we can have an impact on 3 billion students. And we know that educators are multipliers, which is really where this sort of stat comes from.
Yep.
So that's one of the things, and the way that we are measuring that is by tracking how many people we're engaging around the world through our free events, through our courses, through the grants that we're giving. So, Mike, I don't know if you want to talk about the grant that we're giving right now for peer-to-peer learning.
Sure. Yeah. So we are, as part of our community, we wanted to really empower our community to host in real life events on the ground, working within their communities and helping to teach others about innovative and emerging technologies. And so over the last about 6 or 8 months, we've been running a grants program through our DAO community, where members who are NFT holders of our Ed3 Educators collection are able to apply for a grant of up to $500 or $1,000 for events that are taking place in their local communities. And so through that program, we've given out grants that have funded events in Jamaica, Nigeria, Australia. We have one in Colorado, Denver, that just took place. We've had, I believe, one in New York. So we've had events kind of all over the world. And it's been really, really exciting to see a couple of things. One, our community come forward to be ambassadors for our community and really for education more broadly, and the mission that we're on here. But also then to be able to see the fruits of that labor, and we have pictures from these events that are taking place all over the world, and folks wearing our Ed3 Educators logos and stuff. It's super cool to see that. And I think the one thing that, again, just to underscore, is that by giving, decision-making back to the community and power back to the community, we find that our efforts are distributed and doubled and tripled because we have so many more people invested in the mission.
Yep. Wow. Well, I know that you guys have a distributed model, but I'd love to hear an example of any stories you have of an educator's experience from starting to work with you to actual application of what they've learned and integrated into their schooling or into their curriculum. If you have any offhand, I'd love to hear some stories of feedback that you received, or anything you want to share.
Yeah, happy to start with that. So I think the first thing to mention, one of the things that we've really tried to do is, be open and acknowledge the idea that folks who are educators come from all different backgrounds.
Yep.
And so in our events, we try to run our events in such a way that, we are very deliberate about opening the opportunities for anybody to come in to our community events, and also to our conference. Our conference is designed to be a water cooler to attract experts from all sorts of different fields. Because in education, the job of educating a child isn't just that of the person who's standing in the classroom, and so we try to be inviting in terms of bringing everyone into our community. And so I think one of the things that I find really interesting is that we have people who are leading ed tech companies who are part of our community and sharing their products and their what they're building, with our community members. And so community members are not only able to, test out these new products, whether they're AI tools or protocols on a blockchain, and they're able to give feedback, which is great because the products are being built, and now the voice of our educators are in these products. But also then we find that this sort of like convergence allows for our educators to learn more about how things work behind the scenes, both from a business perspective, from a technical perspective. And so our community is bustling in terms of like conversations that are taking place between all these different types of people, experts in academics and in ed tech and outside of ed tech and just, the tech space. So it's really, really cool to see that. And we've heard on a number of occasions where educators have got a new tool from our community and brought it back to their classroom and shared how they've been able to, enhance their teaching and learning through the use of this new AI tool or through this new art generation tool. So it's been really interesting to see how the community has sort of been like a water cooler for activity.
And I can give two specific examples. One is an educator called Candido. He has been a part of our community for a number of years now. And he started learning about blockchain, started learning about NFTs, and he's an art teacher. And so he actually sent us pictures about this, and this was like such a beautiful moment. He actually took NFTs and found projects that were really impactful for him, and he took them to his community and to his classroom and basically started an art project where the students evaluated the purpose of the project and the purpose of the purpose of the NFT, the meaning behind it. And then he had the students like create their own NFT based on that NFT. So for example, there were two projects that he chose. One was this NFT that has like the astronaut head. I forget what it's called, but it was really popular. And he basically created a project where students talked about what they wanted to be in life and, dressed themselves in headgear that basically represented their profession. And then the other one that they did was our NFT is this educator holding something in their hands that represents what they teach. And so he removed those objects from their hands, and then he had the students replace those objects in an art project with things that they want to learn in life. That was a really cool and interesting way to think about NFTs that we hadn't. And then another example is one of our team members, actually, Aaron, he has on a number of occasions told us how his life has changed from meeting us. He'll probably be a little bit mad that I'm talking about him. But he joined our community. He, engaged with us and started learning about Web. And since then, so he was working in the classroom setting, I believe as was it Mike? Was it a paraprofessional that he was working as, or?
He was working with students who are homeschooled students.
Got it. Okay.
Students, yeah.
Yeah, so he was working at that capacity, and ever since he started engaging in the work that we're doing with AI, not only has he been able to, one, get a part-time gig with us so that he's able to make supplemental income, but two, he has gotten so deep into AI through the work that he's doing with Ed3 Dao that he has now been asked by his school to take on additional roles and to speak to educators about what he's doing with AI. So it's like things like that are like super to hear about.
Wow. Oh, those are great stories. Well, now shifting to the future, looking 5, 10, 50 years from now, what do you see your organization has evolved to do or to impact or to be?
Yeah, that's a really big question. I think when we think about like 10 years from now, when anything is possible, I'm thinking, what will be the state of teaching and learning with the advent of AI and Web3, right? And some of the things that I think people are worried about is, AI is going to replace jobs or replace educators or replace schools and things like that. And we have very vehemently from day one advocated for the non-fungibility of teachers. So if you're familiar with, non-fungible token, NFT, non-fungible actually means irreplaceable and unique. And so we actually have a slogan that says teachers are non-fungible. So NFTs are non-fungible teachers. And the reason we say that is because we know that the more technology that exists, and the more access we have to things like AI and Web3, the more we're going to need the human connection. The more we're going to need teachers to be role models for students and to be that sort of human and social connection that they're going to need. And the more that schools are going to be a place of social convening. They might not be a place where students go to download information because they can do that at any computer device wherever they are. It's going to be a place where they can meet friends, where they can meet other mentors and coaches and be able to engage in a personalized pathway. And so that's really what we see as the future of education and the future of learning. And that's what we're trying to track against, right? And we believe that if we can, help educators from the grassroots level, from every type of school district, whether it's private or nonprofit or public or whatever, charter, that if students are empowered with the right technologies, then they can start movements, micro movements in their schools, or even start micro schools completely differently and basically move us more towards this personalized, guide on the side rather than sage on the stage model, where students are really able to pursue their passions and their interests in a social space that is really developmentally appropriate to them instead of, just a standardized sort of education that we currently have.
Yeah. Wow. And that's a great example of the future of education. Guide on the side versus sage on the stage. I haven't heard that one before. That's great. Well, amazing. Of course, good luck with that. We're honored to share the work that you're doing. People that are listening that are inspired to get engaged, how could they get engaged? Where could they go to find you? What type of engagement do you look for? How could we get them plugged into you?
A couple of things. One, you can join our community for free at any time at ed3dao.com. More importantly, I think everyone should look into our summit. Again, we made it very affordable because we have global members around the world. And one of the evolutions that you talked about or that you asked about is like, how has our summit changed? And one of the things that we realized is the more educators we have in rural communities, the more accessible we need to make our resources. And so the summit is actually very, very cheaply priced for a 3-day summit, just because we want to make sure that it is affordable for everyone. And that's at ed3futures.com. And the last place I'll recommend, and then Mike can chime in, is I have a newsletter. It's the first newsletter for Web3 and education, and it's the largest. And it provides just really great resources for what's going on in the ecosystem. And that's on Substack. It's called Ed3 World.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you. Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, just one more place to find us. So when you do go to ed3dao.com, there you're able to join our Mighty Networks community. So we just moved off of Discord into Mighty Networks, and Mighty Networks is kind of the hub where all of our educators from around the world can come and join at any time. That is a free and open community. And so in that space, people can keep up with what we're doing as a community. They can connect with other educators and share what it is that they're finding in their context. And so it's a place where even if you're on a different part of the world, we can stay connected. And so it's definitely a big part of our community, something that we really pride ourselves on.
Oh. Well, Vriti and Mike, thank you both so much for your time. We'll be sure to share everything that you mentioned in the show notes. And of course, the event that's coming up in about a month now, we'll make sure to publish that to everyone here. So people that are listening, go to the links that we're providing. Learn more if you want to learn more, and reach out, of course, Vriti and Mike, if you're open to chatting with other people, which I'm sure you are. Reach out to them and figure out how you can get engaged and support. Anything you want to leave us with before we wrap up this interview here?
No, just thank you so much for the opportunity. And, I think we have a big responsibility to our young people to prepare them for the future. And so that's a job for all of us in education proper, and those of us who are on outside of education looking into as well. So we all have a responsibility to the future. And, if you want to be a part of it, we encourage you to check us out.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more thing. You are who you choose to be, right? And if you choose to, learn about emerging technologies and learn about the future of the workforce and learning and teaching and community, then you will choose to be part of the future as well. So I would say, whether you're learning with us or learning with someone else, make sure that you're learning all the time.
All right. Well, thanks again, you both, and good luck with everything. And we're honored again to share the story. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.